Thank you for coming out. It's really nice to see so many of you, and it's surprisingly a little chilly, but it's great to have the doors open. Thank you, Catherine, and the team at A.MANO for hosting us in your beautiful space. We're here to celebrate the artistic practice of Meiasha and learn more about some of the conceptual motivators that go into that work. Meiasha is the outgoing Brooklyn Clay artist in residence. And in conjunction with that, Meiasha also has an exhibition installed next door at Brooklyn Clay. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, we're open late, so definitely if you go to the sidewalk, take a right, we're just on the corner. And I'm also joined by Tyler Green, former Brooklyn Clay artist in residence from the fall term. Tyler and Meiasha's work share quite a few areas of overlap conceptually, and there's also some really beautiful visual connections. So I'm sure some of that will come up in the talk. Tyler and I have premeditated on Meiasha's work quite a bit, which has been really fun, and some of that is in relation to work that was made before the residency. Some of that is work that was made during the residency. So we'll be getting like an overview of Meiasha's practice and just sort of organically going through questions and sifting through slides that sort of relate to that. I want to just sort of outline the residency a little bit for anybody who's just learning about it now or maybe learned about it through Meiasha's work. We're coming up on our 3rd year anniversary in the fall, which is awesome. The program serves to honor and support the vision of BIPOC artists. It's geared towards emerging artists. We encourage artists who have some experience in clay, but may also be working in other mediums. So it's totally open to painters that maybe dabbled in clay or people that would like to sort of expand ceramics into their practice more. The residency provides 24-hour access to a semi-private workspace, free firings, free materials, and individualized support for artists that are focused on learning new processes during their time in the program, as well as auditing any classes. We are switching from 4 months to 6 months, which is going to be great. We'll just allow more ambitious projects, more time, ceramics, even for those of us that are really committed to it. It always takes more time than we think. I'm constantly relearning that. But yeah, so the next application deadline is July 24th, and that'll be a 6-month term. There is, all the details are on the Brooklyn Clay website, but if you have any questions, find me after the talk. I'd love to chat about it. With that out of the way, I'll get into formal introductions for Tyler and Meiasha. Meiasha Gray was born in Detroit, Michigan, and received a BFA from Sierra Nevada College. Meiasha was a former artist in residence at Greenwich House Pottery, where they conducted research into archival ancestral photographs, as well as ritualistic and spiritual traditions within the African diaspora. This research informed a process-based body of sculptural work. Meiasha was also a resident at Anderson Ratch Art Center in 2019. They have shown at Jane Harstook Gallery in New York, the Holland Project Gallery in Nevada, the Tahoe Gallery at Sierra Nevada College, the California Ceramic Conference for the Advancement of Ceramic Arts in Davis, California, and the Capital City Arts Initiative in Carson City. Tyler Green was born in Brooklyn and has been a student of ceramics in various local community studios, including Mouse, Greenwich House Pottery and Gasworks. Tyler is a former artist in residence at Brooklyn Clay, where they explored the historical relationship between clay and Black people by creating vessels referred to as face jugs, which are popular in Black American folk art. They will receive a BFA with a concentration in ceramics and sculpture from Hunter College in 2024. Tyler received the Public Ceramics Fellowship in 2021 and has curated group exhibitions in Brooklyn and Manhattan focusing on Black queerness. Yes, I think so.
Great introduction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So I guess we can get started.
Kick it off. You got the first. Yeah.
Awesome. So Meiasha, what was your process in making your piece? How you were trying to capture the essence of your grandma. Do you feel like it kind of came through? Do you feel like it was sort of ritualistic in the way that you were also making your piece as well?
So I guess I'll talk about the process of making that sculpture specifically first. I made this sculpture very differently than I would other work. I started with drawing. I'm not really a drawer, and that's usually because I feel like I'm not very good at drawing. But I really kind of have been forcing myself to embrace it more because I feel like I'm able to just kind of stretch my imagination more immediately and then bring that back to the studio. So I guess with that piece, I first started drawing sketches of what I wanted to see on the piece, which is not, I don't normally set up myself that way. I'll just like go for whatever it is I'm making. I guess I was kind of considering if I should start as the piece as a vessel or if I actually did want it to kind of transform and take on the image that I was looking at. Let's flip to the image. This is a picture of my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother Mary, which is what the sculpture is based off of. It's based off of this image specifically. And I guess as I was building the piece, I decided that I kind of wanted it to be more of like a creature or a being that was similar in like stature and in stance as what's in the picture. And I started kind of focusing on just different parts of the picture. I found her hands to be like very present and kind of telling of her age. And I guess I started to kind of tie in some of my ideas around myth, especially around her, because we don't have very much history on her in my family. And kind of imagining like her as a spirit or as like kind of a mythical person, and really committing to the piece transforming into like a more figurative form, whereas in my past works I kind of focus on objects. So yeah, the process wasn't similar to the the more ritualistic work where I kind of devote time into formulating a ritual.
Yeah.
It was more about like pushing my imagination and relying on my imagination and trusting it to kind of like, have the piece develop in that way. So.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because these pieces, they're made of clay, so I guess my next question would be like, what is your relationship to clay, and why did you choose that as the medium to help you see through your vision?
So I have like a really long relationship with clay. I first started using clay not in like the usual way, kind of abandoning the ceramic process and focusing on some of the other aspects of clay, like its ephemerality, and using it as a material to kind of mediate other mediums such as like audio, embracing some of like the natural aspects of clay, like how it performs in water, things like that. And so that was kind of like my first approach, was kind of experimenting with the material. And a lot of my work in the past has been unfired, like kind of raw clay mixed with concrete, things like that. And as I continued to develop a process, I kind of made a decision that I wanted some of, you know, my background, my culture to, you know, be in my process. And so I had to start searching for history, for things that, you know, would validate my use of the material. And I kind of found a lack of resource in that, and became more motivated and committed to incorporating whatever research that I found into my process. And it's led me to kind of develop a process that's based in spirituality within the African diaspora, because there's a lot of clay usage there. So as I'm building this work, this work that's in the galleries, more ceramic, and that's kind of the work I've been making since I've been here in New York, is ceramics. But I am kind of still approaching it with these other elements of spirituality. And so, yeah, I think my, I guess,
relationship.
Yeah, my relationship is based in the research and the work I've done to try to find how it's relevant to me, like my identity. So.
And I guess like this is a question because I feel like I'm kind of on the same pathway of like my work is also very spiritual. And one thing that I always find myself in conflict with, and I'm interested in your take on this, is because your work is so personal and so spiritual, you're then sharing it with the public, and people are wanting to buy your work too. And there's all this history that's within it. Like, how do you navigate that kind of thing? Because, you know, if someone wants to buy the sculpture of like, you're the one kind of immortalizing your grandma, it's like, this is my grandma, you know, like you don't want to just like sitting in someone's house, you know? So like, I guess, how do you navigate through that?
I feel like I'm still learning how to navigate through that. I think what's been working, I think what I choose to focus on are moments, especially like me looking at photographs all of the time, are moments where there's like a sense of community is shared, or there's like a celebration, which these are all like really relatable things for people. And I find that when people are looking at the work, they're able to kind of think about their own personal experience, you know, in similarity with the work. So I guess people can be engaged that way. And I guess the other side is like my personal feelings, you know, because there's all of this emotion and also work, and, you know, personal rituals and things like that attached to the work. And I guess it's like a constant battle of discerning. I don't know. I really don't know how I make the decision that it's okay to sell something to someone. But for example, like the cake pieces, I know like my goal is to reach 100 cakes, and I know that I can part with a few,
Definitely,
along the way. And so I don't know, for that project specifically, it's like I know there's going to be such a large quantity of them that I feel like I'm not going to become attached to every single one of them like in the same way, you know? So I guess it's like as I produce more work, I can feel comfortable with like letting go of some of it.
Okay, cool.
And just like making sure that I maintain like within me my experience with the piece and like, yeah, I think that's it.
Nice.
Yeah, speaking of the cake series, the evolving, how many are you at, roughly?
At 9.
9?
There are 9 cakes now out of 100.
This slow and steady.
Yeah,
But
slow and steady. Yeah.
This one in particular is really unique from the other ones that I've seen. And I think, was this one made at Greenwich House?
No,
Or no?
no, I made that after the residency.
Cool.
There.
What I'm interested in this one is the text, and I know there's like some backstory and research that goes into how you started to incorporate the text. And can you tell us how that started and where some of this specific text came from? So I think it also ties into the spiritual component that you both have in your work too.
Yeah. So I often write to my ancestors. It's something I've been doing for a long time. I was taught as a child to speak to them, but that was always a little too awkward for me. Like speaking to space was always just really hard for me. So I started journaling, especially when things are hard. So this is just something out of a journal entry to Mary, my great grandmother.
Got it.
And it reads, "When I hold your photo, I am equipped to continue." And I don't think it says it exactly that way every time.
Yeah, but it's repeated throughout.
Yeah, and it was sort of like a ritual that I formulated to acknowledge her. I don't know if I reached 100 here, but acknowledge her and also like reaffirm to myself like kind of, I guess, my value, or that I'm not alone, like that I have an ancestor who made it to over 100 years and her strength. And I decided like, okay, I'm gonna like start with, I first tried a rubber stamp, like a rubber letterhead stamp, and it wasn't quite doing what I wanted. Another thing I always think about is that my grandparents don't have tombstones, and I always wanted to make them. And when I tried the steelhead letter, it looked like kind of like the word was chiseled, kind of similar to how a word is chiseled into a tombstone. And it kind of just developed into, like, the lettering really adds that feel of memorial, I think, for that reason.
It totally reads as like a memorial to me. And like the palette, there's the dark palette, and it feels like it's a memorial. It did remind me of a tombstone too, which is like, there's sort of a darkness to that, but then there's like, I didn't know what the text read until now, and there's like a real sweetness to that, and it's like cake too. It's like the frosting is like buttercream. It's like very sweet. But I feel like I see that in different ways in your work, where there's like something that's very emotionally heavy, but then it's also like supported by something really tender and something really beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. I didn't know what the text read until now. It's so sweet.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, I think I also kind of knew people weren't going to be like,
yeah.
Or maybe some people do, which is also fine. But it's also, I kind of just really like what it adds to the surface. Like, I don't think I've ever seen text as texture, like, on a surface, which is something I like from like just like a visual standpoint.
Yeah. I like that it repeats too. It sort of feels like a mantra.
Yeah, like a chant almost. That's what I was thinking. Like almost chanting through the the text as like your self-affirmation.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess like my question is another, in terms of like my own practice, I do world building. And I wonder, is that something that you also think about doing? Because it seems like you're encompassing like your ancestral and they're kind of like backing you. So I wonder, is that like a world that you tap into when you're making your pieces?
I think I started developing ideas like this a long time ago when I was using kind of raw clay bodies of creating a place or a space. And at the time, I wasn't really sure like what that space was. But I think especially after building the larger sculpture in the gallery, and I kind of have had the idea of like creating creatures or creating beings or energies or whatever for a while. And I think I can see my work developing more towards like developing that place in a more like intentional way. And I don't know if it's the spiritual place or if it's like just the place that is like between like our physical world and death, or like that space that we visit often, everyone, when we're sleeping, or like a void almost of space that's like, I feel like is kind of between everybody. So I don't know, like, I feel like I will continue to make work more like that big sculpture. And I'm excited to start developing or, being more intentional about, developing a world or a place in that way. So.
Cool. Well, I'm excited.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Me too.
I always love asking people, like, what's your ideal studio day? And, like, what does that feel like? Or, like, what is essential to try and have one of those days? As simple as, like, favorite tasks to do in the studio with the material, whatever you're working with, or, like, are you always listening to music? Are you a podcast person?
I'm an ambiance person. So I think my ideal, it's like my ideal day in the studio.
I felt kind of corny seeing it on paper, but I was like, I like knowing what people's rituals are when they show up to make the work. Cause,
ideally, I won't have any time like constraints, which is like never. And I need like an endless flow of herbal tea and like really fragrant herbal teas as I'm working. I listen to audiobooks while I'm working, or sometimes I'm listening to music, but lately I've been really into like complete silence, like as much as possible. Lots of snacks, pineapple.
Is that number one snack, pineapple?
Pineapple.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think my favorite thing to do in the studio is anything that is kind of breaking rules, like like experimenting a lot.
There's a lot of rules in ceramics.
I know. There are a lot of rules.
I've seen you break some in a good way.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Cool.
Like, that's my ideal.
Yeah. It sounds great. Yeah. I'll have to keep more pineapple in my studio.
I know.
Yeah.
That actually sounds very yummy.
And a humidifier.
I remember you talking about this.
It's a good addition to your ceramic studio.
Yeah, you don't want to be dry.
Yeah.
You've mentioned research as being like an important component to making the work and something that informs however the idea actually takes shape. What does that look like? Is it like family records? Is it searching online? Is it going to libraries?
I think it's a bit of all of the above.
I'm sure it changes a lot too.
Yeah. I'd say recently, I went home, like, over the past couple of years, I've gone home and talked to family and recorded them telling me stories about my ancestors. And I just never listened back until recently. I've been kind of, because it's a, these people can talk. Okay. It's been like, you know, hour-long stories.
Oh my God.
But I think my favorite way to research is through a story and like a first account or something like that. So I've been listening back to those.
Nice.
I've also been visiting the library quite a bit and grabbing any book I can find on like voodoo or Santeria. I think I've been doing more research into like the occult a lot lately. So mostly that for now. And of course like museum visits or you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
So we both feature masks in our work, but I think they have different purposes in them. So I wonder when you do masks, like what is their purpose and like what are you searching for when you make them as well?
Actually, I have some photos of the masks.
Nice.
Well, not that one, but these are current masks. But I've been making masks for a while, like since I was in college making these masks. And just like, they've been like developing over the years. And I always never intend to make them, but I always end up making it like, but I guess this is like another project, the mask project.
Yeah.
First started with like, I was doing press molds of my face. I casted my face. And I was just trying to like change the face or not disfigure, but change the face to capture like an expression that I remember from family. And thinking about especially family members that maybe haven't died, but maybe they haven't been around, but they have like such an impression on me still. And kind of thinking about it as like their impression is like what's so present in me. It's like what I'm made up of. And so I guess it started with my face. And then recently, this is the first time that this is like a silhouette. Like I zoomed into the picture of my grandmother and I just drew the silhouette of her head in the picture. And just made a really quick face, like very quick masks that are like in some resemblance to that photo. And so, yeah, I think it's again just been about trying to connect with family that isn't present anymore. So that's what it is for me. What about for you?
For me, I feel for masks, like I first also got into making them in college because like professors do that like quick
It's such a good project.
4 minute, they're like just make something 4 minutes, and then I realized that like I actually really liked making masks, and then it got to the point where I was like making these figures, and they don't have like an ancestral aspect to it or familial aspect to them. I think they serve as more of like what I like to call fiends in my work, where they're like my little mischievous like Sour Patch Kids, sour sweet gone sort of thing. But they're never sweet though. I feel like that's the thing, they're never sweet. And I like to adorn them sometimes. So when I did my reception, I had worn a mask and just kind of like walked around like I'm a spirit, and I think I don't become Tyler I become something else. Like I'm not Tyler anymore.
Like it becomes more performative.
Yeah, it does become more performative. And yeah, I wonder these floral pieces, you were pressing them into the mask itself?
Yeah, these are masks that I later attached to the larger piece. And I was pressing flowers into, or I was kind of experimenting with that process. I think I've definitely done it before, but I was thinking about funerals, and I was also thinking about like the floral pattern that is in the image of my grandmother, and I kind of just wanted the floral texture, and to kind of, I feel like I'm always trying to add a natural element into my work somehow. So I think that's where that came from.
Gotcha.
Also, those flowers smell like bubble gum when you crush them. It was like a really great process for that reason.
That sounds so sweet. Yeah. So you incorporate these like very earthy elements. So where do you see your art living then? Do you see it living in private or in public in like the outside realm?
Ironically, I think I like them in public, and I would love to do more like installation work.
Yeah.
Especially like site-specific installations. Yeah, I like seeing people interact with it, and even though they're personal works, to me, they're like, I think some of the specificities about them it's like interesting conversations come up from people who are like encountering them. So I don't know, I actually really like showing them in public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
The pieces that incorporate fire, definitely like.
Do you want to give
yes, yeah. So that one is up next door right now. They feel like what I notice in these, and even in the documentation, is a shift in tone where like the cake in natural light, especially when it's like installed in just like a naturally lit space, it feels more celebratory, which is like what I think most people are familiar with that type of birthday cake. And then when it's lit and when it's documented or when it's experienced like at night, to me it takes on more of like a commemorative tone. There's like in natural light it feels like outward celebration, and then in this other state of like low light or no light it feels like inward reflection. And I like really gravitate towards sculptures or practices where like the experience of the piece can sort of shift. And I'm wondering like how you think about that shift and like what it means to you, and do you define sort of like when it's done? Like, is it just two different states, or is it done once the piece has been lit, and then will it ever be lit again kind of thing?
Yeah. I think what's like kind of odd about my practice is that I don't ever envision them ever being like having like a final state. So I kind of imagine that more candles will go, like it'll just become caked in wax. Like, like there's
That'd
just,
be sick.
you know, it's gonna continue to transform the more that it's used. So in terms of it being finished, I never decide that.
It feels appropriate for like all of the conceptual motivators. Like if it's about an afterlife or it's about something ancestral, it's like there's no cap on that. And it also just like as a viewer, I feel like the experience changes based on the context of it, and it's like I would love to see it installed and lit like outdoors. That would be another experience.
Yeah, like in terms of it, I guess like maybe it's because I'm like really close to the work, but it kind of I guess I never considered it having a different, like, emotive feeling to someone.
Because it starts as very,
like, I guess I never think about, like, oh, that piece feels different during the day than it does at night. But there is something to be said about candlelight at night in dark spaces, like at churches or other places, what that brings to a person. It's like, I don't know if I would call it mournful or like sorrowful or anything, but it's definitely more like introspective when you're experiencing candlelight at night. More like a cozy, like introspective feeling than like outward celebratory things like that. But I guess for me, like the piece functions the same regardless of the time of day. But I thought that was a really interesting like response to it. So it's fun. Like it struck me even just before the work that you made during the residency, but I noticed it like even in the documentation, which is exciting because usually like sculpture is a static object. It usually doesn't have the ability to like convey different emotions through an image, and that was a really nice thing. What is it like to have this expansive of an ongoing series, like with these cake sculptures? 100 is a big number, and what like keeps you going, and that's the clear endpoint is 100. Yeah, I think so. Or 102, because we're not 100% sure that she was 100.
Okay.
She said she was around 100.
Yeah.
And my grandfather thinks she was 102. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it feels like there's so much to revisit and that can expand in each piece that it makes, like, I can totally see you getting to 100, but yeah, what do you like enjoy about that long-term project, or what do you not enjoy about it?
I think it's funny because like I feel like even since I started this project, it has changed in a lot of ways. So I think what keeps me like committed to doing it is because I'm really curious to see how it continues to shift and develop and transform through like, and it kind of, to me, when I look at, even though it's just at 9 right now, I can see like moments in my life at those particular few cakes. I remember like what was going on in my life at that time, and like, trying to, or just a good reflection of like my choices, or so I think that's what keeps me committed to it, is like the curiosity of seeing like how do I approach this project like right now, and kind of trying to maintain like a fresh approach each time. So it's, I think it's really nice to have something to kind of fall back on too, and I don't expect to reach 100 until I'm like 100 myself. It's also like kind of, I get a little bored sometimes with like making a square object, and so I take a break, and so I allow myself the breaks. And I'm always, and it's also great to think about like, does a cake have to be a square? Like, that's what always goes through my head. Does it have to be a square? Like how can I transform like this this form more? So
Cool. You use like the same, I don't think I ever saw you do it, but do you use the same kind of like extruder that you would to decorate a cake? Yeah.
It is. Cool. It's literally a cake frosting piping bag. And some people think it's hard to do, but if you get the slip the right, like the perfect consistency, you can do it. You can do it with ease.
That seems like a really good studio task.
Yeah, I do like mixing slip. I don't know why. It just has like a good frothy. I just want to eat it.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like neon orange slip.
Yeah. The forbidden slip.
Yeah.
We've got like 15 more minutes. Is there anything that either of you feel like we've missed or we should circle back to? We could do like one more and then open it up to questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Tyler.
Hello.
I'm wondering if you could speak about like your process with clay and maybe talk a little bit about how certain spiritual aspects have bled into your work as well.
Yeah. So my process with clay is a little bit all over the place. I feel like I'm very much like grabbing. I feel like a little kid, like I'm grabbing at it and I'm just like pushing things together. Like I'm not like a perfectionist at all. Like I'm not like, oh, this is a perfect coil. I'm just like squishing it with my hands and then kind of wrapping it around itself. And I'm really into horror. I think it's because like my mom watched a lot of horror movies growing up. So like I was like forced to watch Hellraiser at like 10 and I'm like, this is creepy. But yeah, and I think like and then when I think about like, you know, when you like Black people in horror and like how they never make it out alive, but they live in horror every single day of their lives. Like, so I just think the relationship is interesting, and I think there's room for me to kind of be mischievous in it, especially because like so many Black stereotypes is usually of Black people being mischievous, and I'm just like, well, I'm gonna reclaim that, and like I am gonna be mischievous sort of way, you know? And yeah, and I think like the whole idea of like nature and like decomposition and decaying, like it interests me because I also feel like as a Black person, like this is not my homeland. I'm not like Black American either. Like my family from the Caribbean, and then even then, like where are they from? So I feel like there's this little weird limbo space that I live in, and I feel like the earth is something that everyone shares together and we all go back to. So I think the decomposition makes me feel like I'm returning to something, even though it's not specifically where I'm from, but it kind of is where I'm from at the same time. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I like to do with my little worky food.
Yeah, it's great that you brought up like nature, because I think we both try to have some elements of nature in our work, and I'm wondering if you have plans for like, you
outside.
know, expanding, outside. Yeah.
I do. I think I love to like leave my sculptures in nature for them to also decompose, because especially if you're working with specific clay bodies, like some of them aren't equipped to like handle really cold climates, so they'll start breaking down, which I think is really cool. And then because sculpture is so static, I think it allows this kind of performative aspect to kind of go through it. But I also like the idea of like it just becoming one with nature, and like if someone finds it, someone finds it, but if they don't, it exists there. It's like, you know, if a tree fell, did anyone hear it? But like the work is still there and it's existing. So I think I don't really see my work in like institutions, like inside a museum. It feels weird.
You filled our
I know.
entry display with dirt. So
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I was like, well, if I gotta be inside, like I originally wanted everyone to be like outside in Prospect Park, and I realized that's not gonna work. But so I brought the dirt inside. But yeah, I think my work just lives outside, and that's where it feels comfortable and like where it makes the most sense for me. So yeah.
Cool. Great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes.
Oh, we got 10 minutes.
Yeah. Does anybody have questions for either Meiasha or Tyler?
So I really liked Andre's question about like what your perfect studio day is. I'm curious, you spend a lot of time in the studio, which I really respect. What is the feeling or motivation that brings you to the studio on your best day? And then what's your feeling or motivation that brings you to the studio on your worst day? That's
a great question. I think I've been getting the question about like, how do you manage exhaustion? Like my roommate's always like, I don't know how you like do it. And I'm like, I just feel like I have to. I don't know where it comes from, but I feel like I just need to do something. On my worst day, I need to do something to feel better, or to feel productive, or something that will be like me gaining something. And so I go to the studio. On my best day, I'm just happy to be there, like, and just like, just happy to be there, just happy to have like the opportunity to do it. I don't take that for granted. So I think that's what brings me to the studio, is like thinking like, wow, I don't think I remember seeing anyone doing this growing up. Like having like the privilege to think about all of these things. Anyone else?
I was really struck, you said when you were talking about how you started working with clay, you used the phrase, I started doing research to validate my use of the material, and I would just like love to hear more about like that thought, that like what is like validating yourself, what that mean to you? Why did you feel you had to validate?
Yeah, I think maybe that's just maybe it can be just being in an art program and they're asking you to do that. But it's also like, I think it's a good habit to get into, to try to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and start asking questions of yourself about like, what is this, enhancing in my practice? Like, is this a material that I actually want to use, or is this just why am I using this material? Where does it come from? And I guess it's me mostly asking the question, like, how is this valid to my process as an artist? And I guess it just felt necessary to have those answers. So, yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
How do you consider color in your work? I'm like very interested in selecting hues, or maybe contrast, or like you've mentioned texture a lot. And I was just curious the way that you kind of incorporate like your color choices within the texture, and how that might share what your vision is.
That's a great question. I think with the cake specifically, it's been about trying to, I think about like what was I going to say? I think about the quality of a photograph a lot, and how to not capture the exact quality, but how can I like convey those qualities using glazes and stuff like that. And I would say like now that I'm mostly using photos, I think a lot of the colors in the images inform how I choose color on the sculpture. But also like red candles mean love, white candles mean death, or I'm sorry, white means life, yellow candles mean death. So it also comes from research about like what certain colors symbolize. Like white is a neutral color, so neutral grounds for whatever spiritual performance you want. Same with black. Blue means peace. So I think that's kind of how I inform, and it's like I needed that because I'm kind of afraid to use color most of the time. So it's like I choose to take from images and take from research to kind of give myself a little bravery there. So yeah.
Will you make a round cake?
I've been thinking about it. Maybe, yeah.
Cupcakes?
I don't know about cupcakes. I've been thinking of smaller, I just made big, molds for bigger cakes, and now it's like so funny, and now I'm like miniature cakes. Now I want to make miniatures, But yeah, I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking of like different shaped cakes too. Yeah. Yes.
I want to know like a little bit more about like the emotional process of like making cakes or like sculptures to be in conversation with your grandma. It's like there's a lot of people like there can be a disconnect between us and our ancestors, right? Like we're privileged to know their existence and their history. So like how do you feel when you make these things? How do you feel after a piece is done? And sort of like, yeah, do you think your connection with your grandma is strengthened even though there's a lack of knowledge that you have?
That's such an interesting question because I really don't know. I feel like sometimes I can feel like I have dreams about like one of my grandmothers a lot, and I never met her, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I've been working on that one, that connection. But sometimes it's kind of like after show depression or something, when you're like, oh, I did that whole thing and it's like here in front of me, and like I still need to know more, you know. And I think like that's also part of this process, is like I think that it's beginning to motivate me to be more like vigilant in looking for details and trying to find the lost history. But yeah, it's like I don't think it's a happy or sad, or sometimes it's a bit of both. Yeah, it's like yeah. Anyone else? Cool.
Great.
Great, thank you.